Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring, well, as you can see, the reversing French destroyer Aigle. Now, I have no idea if I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, sue me. The matchmaking is, of course, as usual, tier 8. This is very common and shouldn't surprise anyone at this point because, well, if you play tier 6 these days, you're bound to get up tiered, which of course naturally tends to turn me off recommending any sort of tier 5, tier 6 premiums because the constant up tiering is, in my opinion, not very enjoyable. Now, the Aigle is well, first of all, we can look at the health pool. 19.1k. This is actually really large health pool. In fact, I'm pretty sure it beats all of its tier 6 competition. In fact, even the Ernst Gaede can only reach 18.6. This is of course with survivability expert on both ships. So this is very impressive. The base speed is 37.8 knots with the speed flag, which actually isn't really that special at all. Most of its competition is faster. In fact, I think the Russian DDs can reach like 40 knots or 39.9 with speed flag. But what does make it special is that the speed boost on it is actually different. It has the French high tier speed boost, which means it gives it plus 20% speed instead of the usual plus 8% speed. So when you pop this speed boost, you rival Khabarovsk. So that is of course very impressive, but on the downside it means you are very reliant on your speed boost. You go from being one of the slowest to one of the fastest depending on if your consumable is active or not, which of course also means that the upgrade that increases the duration of the speed boost is incredibly valuable on this destroyer. Speaking of consumables, you have 3 smokes, if you run the premium smokes that is, and these are Russian smokes, which means they last 81 seconds and they have a 160-second cooldown. So the downtime here is absolutely massive. And that's of course a downside. Having the Russian smokes is never a good thing. And well, I mean, it's very healthy. It's quite fast, but it pays for it in multiple ways. First of all, the size. Well, the camera is a bit bugged actually on the ship right now. For some reason the camera is slightly lower than it should be and you can't zoom out. But the ship is very large. I would say it's probably as large as the Ernst Gaede in length. But it actually extends a bit higher from the water than the Ernst Gaede does, which means, of course, that you are a big, juicy target. Also, it has a horrible turning circle, 680 meters, which is almost as bad as Gaede's 690, and it also has a pretty damn bad rudder shift. So if you end up being shot at, like I am here, turning away and trying to dodge shells doesn't actually work that well. And the amount of damage I start eating is dreadful. And I have to smoke up and I have to shit my pants and hope that I survive. So the amount of damage you take if you get caught by the enemy fleet in any way is massive. Another problem, well, the shell velocity. Actually, I will get to that later. But yeah, the AA, practically non-existent. The guns, well, you can already kind of tell here. Are you seeing these firing angles? Are you seeing this firing? I can't shoot all my guns on this Bismarck. The torpedo angles aren't particularly good either. The torps are average. The torps on another DD would probably be good. The torps on this ship, they don't really work too well with it. They hit extremely hard. The torps hit for 18.4k of damage, which is really hard hitting torpedoes. But they move at 57 knots, which is very slow. And they only have a 7-kilometer range. Now, 7 kilometers of range isn't bad on something like a kamikaze that has excellent concealment, but the Aigle has a 6.8 km concealment, which means you have a 200-meter buffer on where to use your torpedoes. Another problem is your air spotting range is also pretty bad at 3.9 kilometers. This is with these are numbers with camo and concealment expert. So this is 3.9 even when going full stealth build. In comparison, something like the Farragut has an air detection of 3.9, Anshan has 3.2, so you understand that having an air detection of 3.9 even with concealment expert is pretty damn bad. And that of course means that trying to sneak into range and use these torpedoes puts you at risk of being carrier spotted by spotter planes, fighter planes, all this kind of random stuff, so it makes it harder. So the combination of these short-range torps, even though these torps have a 1.2 km concealment, which is really good, and they reload in 77 seconds, which is also pretty good. The problem is that they don't really mesh with this ship that well. It's really challenging to use these torpedoes because, once again, 6.8 km concealment ship with 7 km range torps in a tier where you run into stuff like Belfast that just radared me earlier is not very fun. And when you have a huge ship like the Aigle, and if you don't have your speed boost active, you tend to get spotted and blasted pretty damn hard whenever that happens. So yeah, it's pretty nasty. It's hard to make use of them. The guns are 139 millimeters. You have 539 millimeter guns. Now these are actually, this is a pretty damn large caliber at any tier for a DD, let alone tier 6. And the normal reload is 4.8 seconds, which is actually not that bad. I run BFT in this commentary, which means of course that my reload is 4.3 seconds instead. If you run the flanks like I do, well, then you'll have a 10% fire chance. The HE Alpha is also 1.8k, sorry 2k, whereas US DDs have 1.8 and Russians have 1.9. But the problem is, as we can see once again here, you see these firing angles? The firing angles are so bad. They are absolutely awful. You cannot, if you kite away, you lose a ton of DPS. If you push towards someone, you lose a ton of DPS. The only way to actually bring your guns to bear is to pretty much give full broadside. Any sort of angling just kills it. However, the Alpha is good, and the pen seems decent. Well, I mean, this is an Aoba, he's dumb enough to give me broadside, and I think the AP does something like 2.6k each, so an Aoba that gives me this much broadside is pretty much a free kill for me to farm, and he found it out the hard way. He's probably torping me, but I have my speed boost active, and this ship actually accelerates really, really well when the speed boost is active. And oh, another issue about these shells. You might see that they look slow. That's because they are extremely slow. These shells have a shell velocity of 700 meters per second. To put that into comparison, the Anshan has 870. The Farragut, 792. So the same kind of downgrade you experience in gun velocity in going from the Anshan to the Farragut, you experience the same kind of downgrade going from the Farragut to the Aigle. So that gives you an idea of how much you are downgrading in shell velocity. And of course, with these firing angles being awful, I can only use 3 guns. At this angle, I can only use 3 guns. So that's like 40% of my DPM that I'm actually losing if I try to kite away and shoot. And this combination of extremely slow shells and extremely horrible firing angles means that fighting other DDs isn't actually as good as one would hope. Add in the combination of this ship being extremely large, having a terrible turning circle, it's not really that good at knife fighting other DDs. It's very easy to hit you, it's quite easy to torp you, you struggle to bring all your guns to bear. If you want to bring all your guns to bear, you're also a very easy target to hit. It's like, if I had to describe this ship, it would be as a struggle. I finally get killed in this game, a fairly short example game, because honestly I wasn't really too interested in selecting any really long game, because I felt like this game showed both the strengths and the weaknesses of the ship really well. I did break 100k, 104k damage, which is pretty okay, I guess, but I mean, the game ended in a loss. My team didn't really want to push any of the capture points. They all hid at the northern cap. I mean, if we look at the detailed report, topping the scoreboard in a tier 6 and a tier 8 matchmaking is of course always a sign that your team didn't really put too much effort into winning it. And ultimately though, the ship is a tier 6 premium. And tier 6 premiums, as I mentioned earlier, are pretty much automatically on my shit list. The tier is awful. It's not fun to play. You are constantly up tiered. Add in a destroyer that has large size, massive turning circle, bad concealment, and you kind of become a juicy target for everything. I mean, cruisers will love to shoot at you, battleships, because of your large size, there's a high chance of getting a lot of penetrating hits on you, which means of course massive damage. Even carriers, I mean, carriers can start manual dropping at this tier, and Aigle has, Aigle, whatever, has no AA, and turns like a brick, which means of course that it's going to be very very easy for a carrier to line up a perfect drop on you, and there's not really much you can do about it when you turn at 680 meter. You have a 680 meter turning circle. If your speed boost is on cooldown, you're also one of the slower DDs at the tier. I think the only one slower is something like the Shinonome, or maybe I don't know what the Akatsuki's speed is. Akatsuki is tier 7 though. I don't know what the IGN speeds are, but in general, you're among the slower part. So, how could I possibly recommend this? Not only even if you get favorable matchmaking, you have to struggle with the horrible concealment combined with the very short torp range and the horrible firing angles, and not even the speed. And I think the tankiness and the gun alpha really makes up for how unfun the ship is to play. It feels more like a struggle than actually enjoying it. So yeah, this is not a ship I can recommend, and honestly I've been pretty disappointed in it. It's fast, sure, it handles great with speed boost, it accelerates and reverses really well with the speed boost active, but those aren't big enough things to make me recommend the ship. Personally, I think it still needs work. I think turret angles could use some work, and does it really need to have 7 km torpedo range? Like, if the problem is balanced, then they could easily lower the alpha damage on the torps. Like, instead of having 18.4k damage torps, lower them to 16.4k and give us 7.5 km torpedo range. That additional 500 meters would help so much in utilizing the torpedoes. But whatever, those are just my suggestions. Ultimately though, I don't really enjoy this ship, but let me show you guys my recommended build for it. Right, as usual, I will show you guys the module. Not really much to talk about here because, well, it's a premium. You should run premium smoke, and honestly premium speed boost is so valuable on this ship, and premium repair. I mean, it is a premium ship, so might as well go all out. Speed boost is probably a pretty high priority because, as I mentioned, it gives you 20% unlike the normal 8%. Upgrade wise, turret survival and speed boost modification here if you have one extra, if not engine survival, better dispersion because your AA is garbage, and faster rudder shift because the default rudder shift is something like 4 seconds, almost 4, so you kind of need it, especially with the combination of this large size and large turning circle. If you don't have it, you're going to struggle dodging those torpedoes, and your acceleration is actually very very good if you have speed boost active, so you don't really need propulsion mod at all. Captain perks wise, priority target, you need to know when people are aiming at you. Last stand, survivability expert, concealment expert. Otherwise, you're probably going to struggle to even use your torps at all. Once you have this basic build, well, Adrenaline Rush is amazing. Turret Traverse makes it much more comfortable, especially since you struggle so much with the turret angles that I mentioned are pretty damn terrible. And finally, BFT to lower that reload because the guns they do have great alpha, they have great fire chance, and if you get a chance to use them, you want to pump out as much damage as possible. Ultimately though, last 2 points, I'm not entirely certain. Maybe you can skip expert marksman and get something like torpedo reload or fire chance. These are both options, but that's requiring more than a 17-point captain, and I haven't been bothered boosting a captain more than this because honestly the ship isn't very interesting to me, and I think it's pretty underwhelming. It looks great though, don't get me wrong, this default camo looks amazing on it. I'm a great fan of the looks on this ship. I mean, this is a badass looking ship in my opinion. The problem is I don't think it's very good, and the camo gives you the usual 50% XP. Signal wise, detonation and speed and fire chance are probably the ones you should your go-to things. Other than that, not really much to talk about. You can just run money and XP. Anyway, that was my Aigle commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll talk to you guys later.